I liken it a lot to spot and stalking mule deer out west. You're walking a lot, you're picking out that one and going for that one.
How important is that first cast?
A lot of people give up on smallmouth a little bit. You know, everybody likes to go chase them in late March, April, May, you know, those glory months, and they're great and everything, but it's worth the effort to get out there, and I actually kind of prefer it.
If you had to pick 3 flies for the Ozarks.
Once you kind of master that idea of how we like to fish these small creeks in the summer and that spot and stalk thing, it's a blast.
In the Ozarks, people have always lived in rhythm with the natural world. Hunting, fishing, living off the land aren't just things we like to do, it's who we are. And though our lives are inextricably linked to the land we live on, today we've never been more disconnected from it. So join us as we travel across the region, bringing you the voices of the Ozarks, deepen our connection to the land, sharpen our skills in the outdoors, and learn what it means to be an Ozarker. Welcome back to the Ozark Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Viet, joined as not always by guest host of the show, and switching it up a little bit. I don't have Plunkett with me here today, so I brought along another buddy, and that is Bear Newcomb.
Yep, here to fill Plunkett's shoes.
That's right.
Pretty big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill, man, but I think you've got what it takes.
All right.
He doesn't do a whole lot.
See. He doesn't do much.
He asks the hard questions, and so as long as you come up with a couple random out-of-the-box stuff in here, I think you'll be able to make it work.
See what I can cook up.
So we got Bear with us, and we've made the trek. It's about a 2.5 hour drive from where I live over here to the Mountain Home area. And we're sitting in a place that, if y'all have been watching for a long time, we've been here before, and that was to interview Mr. Duane Hada, who we've got back on the show today. So welcome back, Duane.
Oh, it's great to be here. Always a good time.
Yeah, and thanks for having us back to your shop here, the Rivertown Gallery, right off the highway. You can't miss it as you're driving by. Stop
Super
in,
cool place.
Say hi to Duane, and then we've also got another guest who we've had on before, and it's been a long time since we've had him on, and that is fly fishing guide and son-in-law to Duane, and that is Tad Fore.
I'm excited, man. It's fun to do something with my father-in-law. He's after my wife, probably my biggest supporter. So this is gonna be fun. We got a lot of stories.
She married well. I'm proud of it.
There you go.
A lot of guys don't like their son-in-laws. This guy is the exception.
That's good.
Yep.
That is good. Yeah, it's
Great.
Always better when you like your family.
You bet.
So we came over here today because there's a couple reasons. One, it's we're getting into the hot season. Things are warming up and water's dropping out. I was just floating the Buffalo the other day, and even as much rain as we've been having, seems like stuff is already getting low.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to targeting smallmouth, I really there's probably not 2 better guys in the whole state to talk about this than y'all two, because I know, Duane, your background in smallmouth and everything that you've done in conservation, but also just guiding, speaks for itself. And Tad, I know you've grown up fishing these waters and been doing it your whole life, and been guiding for a couple of years and getting to fish with Duane all the time. You guys are pretty fishy dudes, and so
we have a passion.
Yeah, and so that's the first thing. And then on the next episode, we're going to get into it, and this will be just on the hauler, but we want to dive into night fishing for smallmouth on the fly rod. And I'm excited to get into that because I see y'all doing it. You're the only people I see doing it consistently and catching big fish. And so we'll get into that, but not on this episode. So we're going to start with catching trophy smallmouth in shallow water. And to start, just talk me through, as things get warmer, water warms up, things drop out, what do smallmouth start to do? How do they start to stage up in the rivers and creeks, and just what do they start looking for?
Well, the creek shrinks, okay? So what you were floating over very well in April, March, or whenever you start your main smallmouth fishing is no longer there. So things tighten up, but they're still home base for a big smallmouth, and that might be that same boulder cluster, but now it's halfway exposed out of the water. What I like, I actually prefer I love all the seasons, but I love low water season for a couple things. The float traffic diminishes. It gets hot. A lot of people are fair weather fishermen, so you can be on the creek and have it pretty much to yourself. And I love to wet wade, so all those things bring in. Now, the negative side of that, well, still on the positive, what I like is all of your minnow populations are now congregated in mass.
Okay.
So the bass aren't roaming as much. There's a very set go from the home base of this big log rock structure and get out, and this posse of smallmouth will literally rain river slicks and different dusky striped shiners in mass and just run them up onto the banks. And then the crawdads are very active during that time. So it's, I guess, the fact that these fish are very concentrated, the bait's very concentrated, you know where they're going to be, and you pretty much, for the most part, will have it to yourself a lot because the conditions have changed anyway. Now, on the other side of that, those fish become hyper selective. And I say hyper selective. They're a wary animal, so you're going to have to be a little better in your wading skills, and you're going to do a lot more visual looking for them and reading water and that type of thing. Because you know, a lot of times you're going to see them just spook out ahead of you if you're just in there real clumsy wading and that type of thing, and not paying attention to how you approach and those type of things. So.
Yeah. That's like kind of thinking about it. I was like thinking about like, oh, what could we call this? And I was thinking how to catch trophy smallmouth in shallow water, but it's really like how to hunt them.
Yes. Oh,
because
yes.
They are spooky. They're picky. That water's shallow. It's usually clear, like especially if you haven't had much rain, like stuff is just super clear. And so it is a hunt, and
Yes.
it's not just like blind casting all the time and just pulling whatever you catch.
Well, especially if you want to
fish.
target big fish. A lot of times, Tad and I, or if he's got clients that he's guiding, or I'm fishing, and we'll get up on a high bank with polarized glasses and scan, and like, okay, you see that big boulder there, and you see that nose sticking out, or that big tail, and that's your target fish. That's that big 19-incher that you want to catch, or whatever. And if you want to target him, you're going to go one-on-one, just like it is hunting, and you're going to try to make that one cast, really, that perfect cast in that strike zone, and try to entice him. I remember the one before y'all moved to Colorado that time, and we were at the bridge on.
That's one of our secrets.
And I spot, well,
Hold on, Duane.
but I saw this enormous smallmouth cruising around a boulder from off the bridge. And we also saw somebody pull up to the parking lot, and he was real slowly getting his fishing gear out. And I told Tad, I said, "Get to the parking lot quick, get your rod, get down there, and I'll."
Don't let that guy get in.
Well, I hate to be that way, but I'm like, we saw it first. So
for the fish.
Anyway, so I literally called the shot for Tad on where this fish was cruising, and he threw one of my creek crawlers out there and let it sink way up ahead instead of casting at the fish, casting way up ahead and let it and one cast, stripped
One
it
cast,
in,
first
and
cast.
beautiful, big, I mean, Canadian-sized smallmouth for a creek around here, and that was memorable. And you know, and it was, but that fish on a wrong cast or anything would have shot out of there and gone back up under the bridge and where he normally lives. But he was out roaming, and it was that time when he was looking for minnows. But
to circle back to your original question, like the changes in the water type and all that sort of thing, and kind of piggyback on what he said. And you can kind of see it if you're out there every day. You see the change start to happen, and sometimes it'll happen during that day you're on the creek. So they'll move out of their wintering holds, you know, those deep, slow pools, you know, where they're just hugging the bottom, real lethargic. You'll see it happen. You'll see that transition happen where they'll move out of those holes, and they'll start moving into these highly oxygenated, shallow, you know, riffles and shoals, chasing minnows. And I've been out there plenty of years where it happens that day. You know, that morning, still a little chilly. We're catching them on slow retrieves in the deep pools. And as soon as it warms up, they move into those shallow runs. But as we enter into this summer season, they're going to be there immediately. They're going to stay in those shoals chasing minnows. That's where the minnows go. So fish are going to go where the food's at.
Yeah. So it can really be a flip of the switch on a single day. So you guys have been out. I know you guys just did a clinic down in Mena, down in the Ouachitas. What have y'all been seeing on the water so far this year? I mean, we're talking right now late June.
It's been a yo-yo year. Every time it's gotten good, then it just gets deluge of these, you know, amazing flood. You know, so it's been a yo-yo, but it's finally, I think, settled down, and we arrived on some pretty ugly water conditions and they got right within about a 2-day period while we were down there. So we had some good fishing.
Yeah.
But we had to also jump around a lot.
We got to get creative with
yeah.
it, because we're putting on a show for these guys that came up out of Louisiana looking to have a good time and learn a little bit. So we had to get creative. And luckily, Duane spent a lot of time living and teaching in Mina, so he has access to a lot of places down there.
I'm still
That
well.
helps.
Well, that's I was telling you, this great connection that we just made anyway was through your grandpa. He was my banker down there in Mina, America, when I taught school down there back in the 80s anyway. So
Yeah.
I love that part of the country. It's beautiful.
Oh, it is pretty down
a
there.
lot of good streams. Yeah.
Anyway, to answer your question, like what are we seeing on the creeks right now?
Yeah.
And it's going to be different wherever you're at in the state, but most of what I'm going to talk about today is what I know here on my home waters, Crooked Creek. But they're definitely in their summertime feeding, rhythm where they're in the shallow shoals chasing minnows. They're in that real fast water a lot, so especially your larger fish. When it's got depth, but it's still real fast, kind of like a pinch point in the creek, they're chasing minnows in those shoals. But also along that fast chute, you've got pockets on the bank of soft water with a big submerged boulder, and it's a real quick in and out if you're in the raft, real quick in and out. But as soon as that fly lands on the bank next to that boulder, they're going to shoot out and eat it. So they're chasing minnows really hard right now. So.
You can find a steady run that's got some of that willow grass in there, the lizard tongue or whatever different kinds it is, in about waist deep water. That is a magnet for these minnows, and there's a lot of damselflies up in there now and everything, and those bass will literally be right in that edge. So these are great ambush points for them and everything because they're hot and heavy on. And you'll see this. I was down at like Kelly Slab the other day, and all of a sudden, the water just starts erupting. These bass suddenly, like somebody flipped the switch, and like you see out on the middle of a lake with a white bass or even Kentuckies or whatever, they get schooling. Our smallmouth will do that at times in the summertime. They'll get under a ball of these different types of minnows. Usually it's the little river slicks. That's kind of a local term, kind of like goggle eye. But anyway, it's dusky striped shiners and these little chub minnows anyway, and they'll just blast them to the surface and kind of like little posses, of hunting in a little pack. And, and it'll if you can get a fly in there, you'll hook up. But by the time you land him, it's done, and then you'll be fishing. All of a sudden, it'll break out again. But it's usually like some of these places, like where there's old bridge pilings or whatever, where minnows can run right up against those. Kind of they'll push a wad right up against it and set back, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go, and all the smallmouth just blast into them. It's crazy what happens.
So is it just this time of year they just start getting in groups, or are they like that year round?
Well, different. It's more of an active group because its water temperature is a lot of it. And as the water has shrunk down because of summer conditions, they're more concentrated and the bait's more concentrated. So that's what you're seeing. But yeah, they, obviously even in the wintertime, there's a hole that might hold smallmouth real well and all, but it's a whole different, you're not going to see that kind of activity during those other than it really in the late spring, summer into maybe early fall. But a lot of people kind of give up on smallmouth a little bit. Everybody likes to go chase them in late March, April, May, those glory months, and they're great and everything. But they're like, well, the water got too low. Well, it's a little more work, and maybe your canoe drags on every shoal and everything, but it's worth the effort to get out there. And I actually kind of prefer it. I like that low water.
Yeah, I've given the presentations on this summertime stuff we're talking about, and a lot of your Ozark streams are very similar in their makeup. So you're going to have, if you look like a cross section of an Ozark stream, about a third of it, even maybe to half of it, is a shallow gravel bar, right? And then you've got a fishable channel, with big boulders in it. And as that water drops, no longer can you float over that gravel anymore. All the water's in the channel. So a lot of times in your smaller Ozark streams, it's just best fished on foot. It just is, because then you're floating over all the fish. As that water drops and that gravel becomes dry, it's best fished
even
on
more
foot.
so down the Ouachitas. I mean, they don't carry near the flow, most of their streams that we do. It's a much drier climate, and it's more sandstone instead of limestone and that type of thing. So you get a lot of more potholes. And I was in the Ouachita, and there'd be places where suddenly you just get that cold chill of water that's running from under the stream bed upstream, but yet there's no visible rapids or anything up there. And it's just, the water is still filtering through and it's much cooler. And the fish will relate to that also.
Yeah.
But the washtaws don't carry quite the water volume because of the lack of, I won't say, they have plenty of springs down there, but it's a different ecosystem than the Ozarks, definitely.
Yeah. When you compare the conditions in the summer versus like the spring where you've got a lot more water and maybe more, just like the smallmouth are spread out a lot more, are you then picking a lot fewer places to stop and fish? Or like I'm picturing a day on the water in the summer, and I'm thinking like you're probably going from hole to hole and you're not doing as much fishing in between. Like you're really picking out spots and places because not everything is now fishy.
Right. What held fish back in April may not be maybe dry ground right now.
Yeah.
See? So yes, definitely. So you're being able to read water, and the fish are going to be a lot more concentrated. I'll find root balls or crisscross logs that will have, seems like 90% of that adult population of fish are under that one root ball or rock ledge. I mean, it's just like home base. Smallmouth in our creeks are very much that way. They're like that's the hiding place. That's home base right there.
Yeah.
So that gets even kind of shrunk in a little bit more as habitat because of the dropping water levels.
Yeah.
You mentioned the idea of hunting, right? So
Right.
I liken it a lot to spot and stalking mule deer out west, So you're walking a lot, okay? You're picking out that one and going for that one and then move on to the next one. So you'll walk a lot of miles if you're willing. It seems like I get less and less clients that are willing
to do it.
Yeah, it's hot. I get it, but it really is truly once you kind of master that idea of how we like to fish these small creeks in the summer and that spot and stock thing. It's a blast. It's a challenge, but it's a blast. Tell a story real quick.
Uh-oh.
You're not involved on this one.
Okay, good.
But I had a
This
client.
isn't you lost your phone recently story.
No, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Well, I had a client one time, okay? And essentially what I usually do on these wade trips in the late summer is just like if I was in the raft, we put in at a place and we take out at the next, okay, and run our own shuttle. That way we're not doubling back and adding extra miles that we don't need to on 100-degree days. So we put in at a place. We walked 5 miles, fishing the whole way, right? We're coming around the bend. At the end of the day, it's 98 degrees outside. I think this day, if I remember right, I had a fever because I was dangerously hot.
You
right?
were working this day.
Yeah, I had a fever. And we had taken a couple swims on the way. Anyway, we were coming around the bend. We could see the vehicle. And I told my client, okay, man, get your keys out. We'll hop in, and you'll take me back to my truck at where we started. And I see he goes ghost white, right, when I ask for his keys. He doesn't say anything. He gets his bag out. He already knows he forgot his keys.
Oh, no.
He gets his bag out. Formality's sake, he starts digging through his bag.
Like
they're in here
without,
somewhere.
Yeah, without intention. He's like, I know they're not in here.
And he dumps everything out, and they're not in there. And so it's hot. I give him a bottle of water. I say, go sit in the shade, and I walk the 5 miles back. So,
Dude,
and
you earned your keep that day.
So I get in my truck, and there his keys were sitting in my passenger seat. So anyway, I got in the vehicle and drove back. All that to say, if you're willing to walk and you bring along your keys, it can be a lot of fun.
Can be fun, yeah.
Yeah, and it's very niche. It's not everybody can do it or wants to do it. But once it clicks, just like with anything, even when you're learning to fly fish, once that clicks, it's a whole new world.
Mm-hmm.
It opens your eyes to this new way of fishing. That's a ton of fun.
That's the thing about fly fishing that I always come back to is like understanding these natural imitations and presenting flies and bugs and crawdads in a way that they're already naturally occurring there.
Sure.
It opens up a whole nother underwater world of like, this is what's going on that I'm just tapping into that. I'm just becoming a part of their little ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like just a mind explosion for me. It's like, this is so cool. It's like getting that underwater world. I love that.
Hey, wow. Okay.
So are you guys finding like on these super hot days, is there a point in the day where the bite slows down, or is it pretty consistent throughout the day?
Smallmouth are very opportunistic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, there will be periods, maybe right after daybreak, where smallmouth will come out and roam more. But I have found if you can find that fish, and now the big boys, they can be a different. They've been through that rodeo a few times, so they can be a little. But most smallmouth can be prompted and teased, and whether they're actively feeding or not, they don't have hands to catch anything with. They got to investigate it. You put it in the strike zone. They're just programmed to chase, it seems like.
Mm.
Having said that, the low light periods, I've been on floats or wade trips in this time of year, and suddenly cloud cover comes over and you see those minnow chases take place. So they can be triggered by low light conditions or things that, whatever it is, but I'm not well, you got to be out there for the first 2 hours of daylight to have any luck. That's not true.
Because that's a pretty common belief, I
Right,
think, in a
right.
lot of people.
Yeah.
It's like,
You might
if you're
have
not
a
there
better-
first thing or last thing in the day, like, you're just probably not going to
It
catch
might have
them.
been the prime feeding period of that day,
Yeah.
but by no means is it like, well, they're just not going to eat. Okay. Now we may be contradicting ourselves because this night bite.
Don't go there yet. We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, yeah.
Well, to jump on that a little bit, so another advantage of being on foot in the summer. So you won't have those lulls on foot, right? Because you're actually working a fish over and making him eat. If you're floating, I usually do see a mid-afternoon lull, okay? Because they're less likely to eat, and you're covering while you're not stopping, right? So when you're floating, you're going to keep going. So there is an afternoon lull if you're floating in the summer, okay? Or at least what I see on Crooked Creek. But if you're on foot, typically you can avoid that lull because you're
see.
actually targeting that
So
fish.
if you can see the fish,
Mhm.
you can make them bite.
I think so.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
They might tuck away more under rocks, but if you're on foot, you can go after him. He's not going to come to you, but you're going to go to him.
Yeah.
But in the raft or whatever, when you're floating,
You're going to get one pass, and
exactly.
he may not even look at it. Yeah,
Exactly.
gotcha. That makes sense. So you've got these spots, and you've got these, kind of more concentrated areas where you've got, I guess, just like you got to be more picky about your spots, and you're not going to fish everywhere, and you're going to cover some ground. Once you find a spot and you see these fish holding up, how are you approaching that? Because it'd be really easy to go out there and just blast the best cast all the way across the stream, drag it over the top of them, and just be like, nothing happened. Like, how are you approaching that too, where you're not going to blow them out and cause them to spook and then just not eat?
Yeah, and this was a big thing. So I guided for a few years in Colorado, and they were all wade trips, all on foot. So I learned a lot about reading the water, spot and stalking in that way. So I think number one is taking your time. Okay, so take your time to see a fish. And, we're talking a lot about spot and stalking. So the first part of that is spotting, right? So see the fish. Take your time. Just don't go, trampling through the water and busting everything.
You're pushing a wake up ahead of you. They sense that, and they're running up under that boulder, and they're going to stay put till you long after you leave. A lot of times.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is training your eye to see a smallmouth, right? And a lot of that has to do with reading the water, where he might be. A lot of times in this low water stuff, especially high sun, high noon, they're going to be near the banks, under boulders, or around a boulder where they can get underneath should danger appear. So being able to see that taking place and knowing where that fish is of most importance to me anyway.
And it becomes, we've got a lot of experience, but it almost second nature. You're dissecting. As soon as you step up in that pool, you're eliminating the unproductive water. Okay. We used to, I'd guide sometimes, and I'm like, guy would go over into a place that I don't think a tadpole would be there, and just cast himself silly. And I'm like, come on, bud,
Come on, brother, get out of there.
and I'm like, there's never going to be a smallmouth there. It's the wrong. So being able to go right to the sweet spot quickly and without doing a lot of casts. It'd be like the same of, you're going to hunt with a single shot rifle and you got one good shot. You're not going to, you're going to make it count.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best.
You're not going to
analogy.
take the 200-yard shot through the twigs.
Right.
And sticks.
You're going to start really honing in on that little triangle, that spot where, and anytime we can either physically see the fish that we're fishing to or that structure that we know he's in, or we saw him swim into that structure. Sometimes that happens. He's up shallow and we did bump him or something. A bird of prey flew over in a shadow, and man, I mean, they're wild animals. I mean, they will bolt and they'll go and they'll hucker down somewhere, and you watch a little bit, and pretty soon you see a nose stick out of the roots or under a rock or something, and you go fish to that nose.
Yeah.
Now,
So take your time, spot and stock.
Yeah.
Take the time to actually do the spotting.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Now on the flip side of that, so he talked about how we kind of can eliminate some of that water and go where we know the fish would hold. But like on our clinics we do, like we just did in Mina this past weekend. And Keith, you've had him on here. He's one of our buddies. He does those clinics with us. He talks a lot with our guests about this. So you're new, or you have very little knowledge about chasing smallmouth on the fly, right? Or let's say you're at a new river or whatever it may be. He talks a lot about dissecting that piece of water you're in a pie shape. So work close first and work this 45-degree pie slice. This slice, nothing. Okay, go a little further. Work that slice.
Like taking bites out of that piece
Exactly.
of pie.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't think this guy would. I'm not going to call his name, but one of our guys on this deal, it's obvious he was a saltwater redfish fly fisher from down in Louisiana, and we're stepping up in this stream, and he's trying to bang 90-foot casts across 4 different currents. And I'm like catching fish literally 15 feet in front of me because I'm fishing this ribbon of current and very controlled, almost like a nymphing technique.
You're almost tenkara fishing.
Exactly.
Right above.
It's a lot like this Euro nymphing type thing. I think, Ben says it well, is you're Euro nymphing at a distance, especially with the crawdad fly or I tie a lot of these jig-like streamers, and I want to get them right down on the bottom and then, and lift and hop and twitch and just make it act like a minnow down there, in the rocks. And you can't strip it all the way across 4 different current seams and maintain that control of that retrieve and detect the strike very well unless he just slams it and almost hooks himself.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But it just doesn't feel as good as casting out a 60-foot cast.
Yeah. Doesn't
Just
look,
a hero
doesn't look
shot.
as good.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway.
We were prepping for a redfish trip, me and my wife, this last fall. Him and his wife went with us, and I had my wife dialing in her 80-foot cast, right, out in the yard, and she got it dialed in. And we got down there, and we were roll casting 6 feet the whole time. So very similar situation.
Picking them off.
Yeah. She's like, why was I practicing all that? That's funny. So that's good. So spot and stock, breaking apart the water. And then talk to me about this. How important is that first cast?
Oh.
Like, is it actually? Because I think like it'd be easy to be like, yes, it is, but is it really? Like, can you, if you blow the first one, are you going to have more chances?
Sure,
or?
but none of them as good as that first one.
Okay, all right.
Okay, the
Talk to
first
me about
one.
that.
Well, look, if I see a cruising smallmouth, okay, especially on a stream that gets a lot of shots over the year, like Crooked Creek, where these fish have been caught and they see a high angler pressure. Anymore, I don't cast. In the old days, I could cast that fish, hit him on the back, he would turn and come to it. I do that now. He leaves a smoke trail for the next county, okay? So a lot of times, instead of casting at the fish, I'm casting to where I know he's headed and let this crawdad fly or whatever I'm fishing settle into the water and let him start easing into that window, and then I activate the fly. And there, especially with the crawdad fly, a lot of times I may let it sit on the bottom a minute or more, just waiting on him to sort of nose his way up around, and suddenly he gets, and you can tell his whole body language when you strip that crawdad, he raises up and flares and comes over and almost does this little cat and mouse game of almost like he's sniffing it, and everybody thinks they just rush in and just knock the fool out. Well, smallmouth that have never been fished before do. Big wise ones will trail it, waiting for you to mess up or do something, or I don't know. They're masters at detecting the fraud. Okay, so slow retrieves are much more important in the summer. A lot of times they're just leaving it sit on the bottom, let him come pick it up. I mean, that will happen on a good fly that's got realism and rubber legs and all that will move in the current. It looks lifelike enough. You just have to give it maybe one little twitch, and that's all it took. And everybody thinks the smallmouth, they're hard hitters and hard fighters, but they can suck it as subtle as a bluegill. Okay, so again, a good pair of polarized glasses, and you're looking for that white flare, just like that when he picked that crawdad up, and you got to stick him on that.
Just
so
that pop of the mouth.
You betcha. So a lot of times, I notorious will guide people. Well, I didn't feel him hit it, and I'm like, you're not. You know, you got to watch. Either the end of the fly line will just suddenly twitch forward slightly, or maybe a slight heaviness on the line if it's in deeper water, or more times than not, what I'm looking for is that sudden white wink of his, mouth and gills flaring when he ate it. So
Yeah.
it's an acquired skill. I mean, this is not easy fishing. You're not going to go out there and just catch a bunch of them like I had a good day and I got lucky. That's probably not going to happen this time of year. You're going to catch every one of them on purpose, especially your mature 16-inch bigger smallmouth. They've seen it all before, and they're
we've kind of become known as the creek crawler guys, right?
Yeah.
So fishing that long tippet, heavy fly, and guys trash it all the time. People will say, "Man, I hate fishing that way." Right? Well,
look,
we're not awesome fans of it, right? But it extends our season on our home water.
That's what you gotta do.
Other streams, maybe not. Maybe you can float the whole thing and throw big streamers the whole time.
Yeah.
We're just talking about what we know and what we do here.
feed them what they're eating.
Yeah.
There's a time when they're eating those big old central stone rollers heavily on Crooked Creek, and there's times where they're picking up a little 2 or 3 inch crawdad. And everybody gets all, let me talk about rods real quick. This is my, hold that just a second there, Tabit. It's a fiberglass rod, and everybody it's a 5-weight, and they're like, eh. But, I can throw this jig crawdad fly on that just fine. Now, you're not doing a lot of false cast, okay?
Yeah.
You're lifting it up, and you're loading it, and you're laying it out there, but I like this because just like a tournament bass guy, when he fishes crankbaits, what rod does he go to? A slow fiberglass. Why? To keep that thing hooked, because there's so much, give on this thing. So anyway,
it's niche,
Yeah.
but we enjoy it.
Yeah.
And
well, it's one of those things. It's like you said, it's not for everybody. It's not going to be like, there's types of fly fishing where it's like, this just feels beautiful and pure. And
this ain't beautiful and this ain't pure.
This ain't it.
Get the fly out there. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hit yourself.
But this is catching fish.
Yes.
Like this is how you're going to catch them in that low and slow.
Yeah, this is
If you threw a full sinking line out there in this low summer, you're just going to park the waters and those fish are gone.
Yeah.
You throw even a sink tip out there in this low summer. We're bone fishing. One guy that I got, he said, we're bone fishing for smallmouth. I thought, perfect. That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're in ankle to knee deep water where a flat comes up off of a hole that's got some boulders, and we're coaxing that bass out, and he is following, and we're trying to engage that cat and mouse tease, and it's a wonderful game. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Talk to me about, you mentioned rod, you mentioned long tippet, and that is, I remember talking about this before, I think with you, Duane, when we fished the All Species Odyssey a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and it was that tippet, like you're saying, it allows you to leave that fly line above the water.
Yes.
And that tippet, your line's not going to be pulling that crawdad through the water.
Right.
Because your fly line's in there collecting all that pressure or whatever. So you can stay there a lot slower and have more time in the water.
Perfect
with that
example. We were
crawdad.
fishing an old weir dam last week.
This is a perfect time to insert this story, so go ahead.
But it was boiling over the top of this concrete weir dam, and fish were packed right in that because there's minnows packed there. But you had to cast it and immediately lift and throw them in. So I wanted that fly to hit and sink right there in the boil and stay there. A lot of guys that weren't catching fish were casting, and it'd just get blown out immediately. So
Pulling their fly line
You
out.
bet. So I was using the long leader, short butt section technique, okay, So as soon as it casts, I'm getting the fly line off the water, so it's not being swept out of there. I'm getting straight down, and as soon as it touches bottom, or either by feeling or seeing, and then I start the retrieve down in that strike zone where they're being blown out and they're not catching fish because the fly hit and was gone where the fish are holding, and I'm going right down their face and keeping it there for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. I was trying to teach these guys. A few of them caught onto it. Some of them never did because it's not an easy thing because the way the current braids and everything, you can't cross that many current braids and maintain control of your fly with other techniques during that time of year, especially.
Yeah.
And he was using a real heavy eighth ounce.
It's a jig fly.
Yeah.
Jig.
I'm tying
jig
a big
minnow.
old.
It's a big
I'm tying
old
a big
fly.
old. We'll use some. I'm tying a minnow on a jig head pretty much because I want to get in there right down in that strike zone quickly and keep it there.
Yeah.
And
And it's not pretty. You hit yourself. It's about like a 22 short. You know, in the back of the, you'll go to your knees crying.
You'll have a bruise.
Yeah, it'll leave a mark.
Yeah. This particular stretch we were fishing was the clarity was awful, right? Because recent rains. But it fished well if you were able to get that heavy fly to sit on the bottom. Because all these fish we found pretty quickly, all these fish were sitting on the bottom.
Down in the boulder beds.
Yeah. And so here we go. So that this is just as much as an indictment on me as it is you, okay? So that bottom, that river bottom was super slick. Okay, there was no gravel, no small gravel. It was big chunk rock slick. Was that dolomite? What was that down there?
Sandstone, magnesium, a lot of,
It was walking on Vaseline with cowboy boots, okay? It was like, all of our guys fell, including me. But he was walking out away from that deep hole he was fishing to come to the bank, and I was standing on the bank surveying like I do best, and he slips, right? He slips, and he can't get back up. He's falling, and he can't get back up. And he's just rolling, he's rolling like a wet log in the river. And I'm like a good son-in-law. I'm on the bank, and I'm
laughing.
I'm giggling like a schoolgirl. Okay.
Stand up.
For which is that easy?
Yeah.
I'm
Just stand up.
I'm just bowled over laughing as hard as I can. Well, he gets up. It looks like he's smiling, right? So I feel better about laughing because he's sitting there smiling.
Didn't break my rod. Didn't lose.
He can't get up. Finally, he gets up, and he realizes his phone is coming out of his shirt pocket, right? So it's gone.
Dang.
So we spend about 20 minutes looking for it, but the clarity is zero, right? I mean, you can't see this far in front of your face. So we're digging around with our feet, can't find the thing, and it's time to go. We got to get these guys back because they got to head to Louisiana. We got to check out of our Airbnb. And we get back, we drop them off. They all leave, and he's like, you know what? How good of a son-in-law are you? And I said, okay, let's do it. So we ran to Walmart, got some snorkels and some masks, right? And, we're 4.5 hours from home. I'm ready to go home. I'm tired. It was a long weekend. But we went and did it. We went and got some snorkels. We had to hike back to this place again. It was a good hike, right? And water clarity is zero, out in the middle of the Ouachita Mountains, and these two grown men out there kicking our little feet, snorkeling around.
Well, like
Just
we were
playing in the water, boys.
No, we were on a noodling mission. We were noodling for a cell phone. I mean, I could have got several good flatheads probably, but we kind of gridded off. We had a good plan about it, but the visibility, we'd be under there with a swim mask, and we couldn't even hardly see each other. 4 feet away from each other or less.
Yeah.
So I came home, and
no luck.
Thank goodness I've still got some good MENA connections, and I'm always having a little mishap down there. And so he said, "Well, what happened this time?" And I'm like, "Well," I said, "How often do kids, maybe swim down here or whatever, And he said, "Not much anyway." And I said, "Well, I scratched on a rock cell phone and put an arrow and piled up some rocks, And he said, "Well," he said, "Okay." He said, "I said, is the river going to continue to drop quite a bit?" And he said, It will, but it's going to take a while." And he said, "It's waterproof phone case and all that?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay." Well, he called me, and because my wife has Find Your Phone or whatever.
Life 360.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she says, I can see exactly, through satellite imagery right where your phone is. And I'm like,
No
wow,
way.
yeah. And she said, "It's still on, there's fish swimming by." So So
You're trying to FaceTime it.
yeah,
Like,
so I'm
swipe,
like, yeah.
open it, answer me.
I got live scope going on, you
Yeah,
know.
you
So anyway, this buddy of mine goes down there and he tries to find it. And again, he said the water visibility. He said but he got a couple of buddies of his. I guess they're on a dive team.
Yeah.
They're in Mena that do maybe whatever rescue stuff or whatever. And they went down there with their tanks and masks in about 15 minutes.
They found it.
Suddenly,
Wow. No way.
suddenly I'm looking on my phone.
No
I
way.
see it moving, you know, along. I'm like, either the current came up but it was on the highway and they
Channel Cat ate it.
Yeah.
Wow. So they found it. So
Yeah.
you sent search and rescue to go find your phone.
You know, that's some good
Mena
connection.
search and rescue.
Yeah.
Good for
So,
you, Duane.
It's all about who you know.
That is.
Anyway, it's on its way here in the mail
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
big mail. And there's some photos of some huge fish that I caught that nobody will believe till that's why I'm worried. To get
You
phone
needed
back.
the evidence.
That's why you sent the dive crew down there.
I had a
have
I had a banner day. So anyway,
Nice.
but,
Well,
yeah.
I've heard on that topic, I've heard that can be a good way to just like learn about fish, putting on snorkels, going down,
gosh, yeah.
watching them. And,
Sure.
and they don't seem to booger out of there when you're watching them.
Right.
if
It's
you
amazing. I
like a
love
big fish.
on these clear water streams. Love on the Buffalo River just to sit on a rock underwater with a snorkel and watch. You can learn so much. And probably the big eye opener for me was how translucent minnows are in clear water streams, and that's why I tie pretty much all of my clousers for Ozark smallmouth with very sparse synthetic materials. You know, I use a lot of that Icelandic, the craft fur and EP fiber, but I put just a few strands and then just some of this Angelina fiber stuff, and I mean it all holds together in that nice teardrop shape, and you can make a minnow look like a minnow very
Yeah.
well, and
Wow.
swim like a minnow.
So you saw minnows underwater.
Oh, you
tell
can see-
if they
you-
were translucent.
Yeah,
tie to
what you
flies.
see is you see the lateral stripe, okay,
Uh-huh.
like on a dusky striped shiner, you see that, and you see the eye, and you see a silhouette, but you can see light through those minnows.
Wow.
Yeah, they're very. So crankbaits don't have that. That's why flies are, I think, so effective because you can really create that translucent look that with it better than anything else, and
Yeah.
that weightlessness too. Okay, and that's part of why I find it to be so effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you fly selection real quick. I know you've got a fly here, and kind of a cool news with this. the Hada Creek crawler. If you guys have ever been fly fishing in the Ozarks, you've probably heard of the Hada Creek crawler. But as far as finding good replications of it, Keith Reeves, who we've mentioned now, he ties a phenomenal
He does.
creek crawler,
You
and
bet.
it is just like I've said this before. It's just like I don't even want to fish them; they're like
Yeah.
jewelry. But he's the only one who's like really doing it to that level,
Right.
And but this is something new.
Well, that pattern. Back to Mena, okay. I taught high school art down there, and a lot of my kids would come in during the lunch period, and I kept fly tying vices in the art room there. And in 1987, he's got photos, and somewhere I've still got the very first prototype that we made of crawdad fly, it was, I think this pattern's been with Umpqua. It's one of their oldest patterns that they still have that's not been altered really at all. The only altercation this year, I designed and talked with them about putting it at a number 2 hook and increasing the size. So it's about a half an inch longer than the previous one, in the same 3 colors: the dark dirty olive, the sand color, and then kind of a rusty brown. And pretty much those 3 will cover crawdads nationwide.
yeah,
I am so excited. Keith will tell you that one of the neat things, he commercially ties them, and then Umpqua has created this, and it's beautiful and works well, and we have them here at the gallery, and a lot of fly shops carry those if they're Umpqua dealers. But the neat thing about this is the multi-species. There's guys in Montana that fish this almost exclusive on the Smith River out there because their brown trout eat crawdads more than anything else.
Wow.
One reason I went to the number 2 size is, I've got guys in the Great Lakes, like Lake Erie, that fish these, and a little number 4 hook on a 6 or 7 pound smallmouth is just not a big enough piece of steel to feel like you got a chance. So even a number 2, that's all I could get Umpqua to go with right now. But I've tied these for largemouth fishing down a Lake Fork on like 2/0 hooks and make them 4 inches long.
Oh,
So, crawdads come in all kinds of different.
Yeah.
I don't throw it on my 5 weight. But anyway, it's a great fly. It's very realistic. It fishes super effective, and It's weighted such that it will ride right on the stream bed. It's got the nice rubber legs and everything. But the other thing that, crawdads and minnows are probably the two things that you can focus on. And as far as minnows, a craft fur clouser in a tan and white or caramel olive and white or something, match whatever your minnows are in clear water. Now, if you're not fishing clear water, you can start interjecting a lot of these chartreuses and yellows and golds and black. We fished a lot of black and purple combinations because the water was so murky this weekend down there. But in the clear water streams, I'm going with match the hatch. If my minnows are brown on the back, I'm going brown back.
Yeah.
And I in my mind, I think it makes a big difference. I asked the smallmouth; they said it does.
You
They
interviewed
agreed
him.
with me. Yeah, but
You got your own fish
the ones I
podcast.
shook hands with said, "Yes, you fooled me."
You fooled me.
Yeah.
You've done it again,
Yeah.
Duane.
But so minnows and crawdads primarily, but then there's other things. There's the mad toms that they obviously eat, and yeah. And
I've seen you catch a big fish on a mad tom.
Yeah, oh yeah, and they're deadly. And then there's they'll take the stray little spring frog every now and then. They'll leap up out of the bushes and the water willow and grab dragonflies in the summertime too. And hellgrammites, obviously, that's just a gimme for a smallmouth diet. So they are somewhat opportunistic, but I think within that and talking to people that have sampled smallmouth diet and everything, in the summertime, the crawdad and minnow combination is pretty much. In some streams, it's more minnows than crawdads. Some,
Yeah.
it's kind of weird.
The Illinois is a good example
Yeah,
of that. The
yeah.
Illinois is like mostly minnows,
You
very
betcha.
few crawdads in their diet.
Yes.
And a reverse of that is we did a clinic on the upper 11 Point River.
Yes.
We caught 186 smallmouth between 6 anglers on our clinic
It was
day.
it was
a
like
great-
it was
It's
amazing.
a great trip.
And
Yeah.
do you know how many were caught on crawdad flies? 186.
Really?
It
They
was-
would not touch a minnow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's it depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and then every time you stepped in the gravel, you see these little, and it was the ringed crawfish, the one that's very native up there that this imitates in that size. That was what was shooting out from under the gravels and rocks. And when you catch them, you see the pinchers sticking, up out of their throat. They were, you hold them and their bellies feel crunchy, full of crawdad bodies. And
That's cool.
yeah.
If you had
So-
to pick, I'm going to ask you kind of a tough question.
Uh-oh.
If you had to pick 3 flies for the Ozarks, and I know, like you said, it's going to depend river to river, but if you were just like, I'm just going to build up a collection of smallmouth flies, and I'm just going to focus on having 3, what 3 would you pick, and maybe what color?
Well, there's
and
3
size?
colors of this fly, right?
It'd be all 3.
I would fish it doesn't, a lot of crawdad. One of the reasons I came, there was not a commercial crawdad that was worth fishing.
Mm-hmm.
People make them unweighted or put them with the hook down. Okay, 2 strips, you're hung. So that's part of what drove me to design this crawdad is for an effective fishing fly.
Have the hook up.
Have the hook up, weight on the bottom, and sink quick like a jig, and stay on the bottom throughout the retrieve. So you need a good crawdad fly, whether it's mine or even a lead-eyed woolly bugger with rubber legs, something that's bottom scratching in crawdad colors and life, okay? That would be probably one of them. The other one is just your simple clouser minnow. I'm not real big fan of the bucktail version. In saltwater, I fish them for durability and all. They will catch fish, but I think in clear water situations, the one tied, like I explained earlier, with the translucent materials of EP fibers or craft fur just are so much more match the minnow realism. And you can tie them with lightweight, heavyweight, or even like I'm doing them now a lot on jig hooks to get them, right to the bottom and keep them there. So a good minnow imitation. But the third one, I love topwater. And man, I mean, there's nothing more fun than watching a smallmouth explode on the surface. And that could be a simple white cup face popper with white rubber. You got to have rubber legs. I say you have to. It definitely, I would fish a popper with rubber legs over one without all day long. Now, at times you may go to a specific bright blue if they're, like when we go up to Wisconsin, I mean, as long as it's a blue, I've never fished blue poppers. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, oh yeah, this light blue. And I'm like, oh, the dragonflies, see? So that was the whole key there. When I go down in the Ouachita's, chartreuse a lot and yellow. I'm like, okay, and I don't know if that's a grasshopper thing or if it's just the visibility or what it is, but a white popper for me is all minnow bellies are white, so they're seeing that white. I don't know. white's my popper color.
Yeah. What about you, Ted?
I would agree 100% on the popper, at least for around here. And, you know, I hear countless stories. Most people that are largest smallmouth they've ever caught was on a white popper at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with the brightest day.
Yeah.
And I hear that all the time. And there's got to be a reason, you know. 2 is coincidence, 3 is a trend, right? So white popper. Now this is where we part ways, right here.
Okay.
I am dead set on dead drifting a popper, right? And he's dead set on
Shake, rattle, and roll.
Shake, rattle, and roll.
Machine gun it across the water.
Okay.
I'm making that thing like a panicked minnow.
And I get where he's coming from, and I do it at times. Like last year during the cicada, and I remember a few weeks ago you had Chad on, and he was talking about just ripping that thing across the surface during the cicada because those cicadas were skating across the surface. We shake, rattle, and rolled those things last year.
Okay.
But I will say, and it depends on the water type, but a lot of times
I don't have the patience to sit there and let it do it. That's, Dave Whitlock, when I used to fish with him, be like, man, let it, you let it sit. And I'm like, how long? He said, as long as it takes,
Yeah, Lord.
And I'm like, I'm in there, I'm hitting the bank, and I'm trying to create that, and I'm catching a lot of fish, sometimes the smaller, more active ones, but those big old suckers that you're talking about, we have tons of stories of people, not really skilled fly fishers, show us pictures of this big 20-inch 4-pound plus smallmouth. I'm like, caught him on a white popper floating down the middle of the Buffalo in a pile of canoes or on the Illinois River, and just threw it out there, and all of a sudden he just come up and and it's just, I was eating a sandwich and it was hanging over the side of the boat, and not even popping, so there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
a lot, but this is where the discipline comes in, and I have to, if we're going to throw topwater on my trips, I stress this level of discipline, right? So when you cast out, pop that thing a couple times, but what's going to happen? You're going to have 18 long ears go pop, 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 pop all over it.
Yep.
If you have the discipline to not set the hook and make that long ear go flying through the air, let them pop, pop, pop for 5 seconds.
Because underneath him's this guy looking to see what's...
Yeah, they're going to kind of fade away and then drift it 10 more feet, and then here's where that smallmouth's going to come up. They're not going to pop it and follow it the whole way down, those long ears and those green sunfish. They're going to pop it for 5 seconds, and then they're going to just fade away. And then this is where the smallmouth comes into play. But that's easier said than done.
Sure.
You see that big pop, you set the hook, and that long ear goes flying through the air.
Back into the trees.
Yeah. But
So you would go white popper.
that wouldn't be number one.
Okay.
But that would be my top water color.
Okay.
White.
Okay.
I think number one.
Fish in the water column is important. That's why the jig crawdad, jig clouser, and then some other kind of minnow, whether it's a zonker or I don't know. There's lots of mid-level minnows out there. A lightweight clouser is what I do, or an unweighted clouser, just for that mid zone.
Yeah. Number one would be a minnow. If I'm going anywhere and I want to go catch some smallmouth, I'm starting with a minnow. Then this guy would be number 2.
Creek crawler.
Yep.
Crawdad.
The creek crawler. And then white popper. So I say we're pretty similar.
Yeah.
In that, so like Bill Belichick, right? He's got his coaching tree.
Yeah.
All these coaches have gone off and coached everywhere else. Well, if you look hard enough in the Ozarks, Duane Hada's got his tree.
Yeah.
Okay. He has infiltrated and influenced most
I can still learn.
Ozark fly fishermen, right?
I fully believe that. That is right. That's
So
on
I'm
the money.
I'm Matt Patricia in this situation.
You're fully
right?
within the coaching tree. Yep. I gotcha.
And anytime I see somebody catch a fish, I'm curious what did it take, and how did you fish it and that type of thing. You don't catch big smallmouth by accident very often.
Yeah.
They don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
They're like a big buck. He's not going to just step out, in broad daylight. Probably he'll do it once. you
Yeah.
know.
It makes sense. That's why they get big.
Yeah.
And that's why they
so
get
when
they're smart
somebody
and
catches,
feisty.
I'm curious. Okay, what I want to know the story.
Yeah.
Because it's never. Even if it seemed like it was a fluke, it was something that they did that was genius that they didn't realize.
Yeah.
it was accident on their part, but the technique was spot on for that
It was
situation.
brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Now the colorway on the clouser, I think we've talked about this in the past multiple times, but I think for our Ozark streams and even more specific Crooked Creek, for me to have the most confidence in that minnow, it needs to have a dark back, white belly, and it's got to have, for my confidence, it's got to have that black lateral line, okay? Because most of our minnows throughout the Ozarks have a black lateral line. So I don't know, I just feel best about my chances when my minnow has that lateral line.
Looks like the minnows in the creek. That makes sense.
I had some, yeah.
You got a prop. You got an
Well,
example.
I hate to show this, but this is, of course, my fly box is always a Ziploc bag. But excuse my. Okay.
So hook up,
Yep.
big eyes,
Yep.
brown back.
It's on a jig head.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
White
see.
belly, and you can see the black lateral line on the other side, a little bit more pronounced. But
Yeah. But
Yeah,
just
that
trying to
looks-
match the minnow.
That looks good.
And that material, when you get that wet, I mean, that's synthetic material. You can see, you can hold it up to the light. You can see right through that thing. See?
Yeah.
Huh.
So that's the.
It's a good looking fly right there.
yeah,
That'll do the job.
It's so simple too. So
I like it.
Interesting.
Let me ask you this. It kind of shifting topics. I appreciate y'all opening up the book on that and talking us through that. Shifting topics. I know Duane, you've done a lot with smallmouth education and conservation in the past, and I know you've been a part of like the stream team, the smallmouth stream team, kind of helping back in the day put together.
well,
some
we used to have what was called the Smallmouth Bass Task Force.
the task force.
Okay.
Putting together some regulations, right?
You bet. It was a team that of not only biologists but also anglers, and I love that about the game and fish during that time of and all. They valued the experience of people who spent their lifetime on the water. Okay.
Yeah.
And our input,
Yeah.
and hopefully they still will. Because we're not biologists, but we're out there. We see what's going on.
Right.
And I love the team with a biologist who can make sense of some of the observations I've had, and we can work together for sensible regulations and those type of things based on the true facts of what's going on, and
Yeah.
everything, and not a political regulation or
Well,
whatever.
that collaboration is super, super important because, like,
Yes.
you can you can have all the science and all the data and have all the schooling and biology background, but if you're not out on the water every day or
Sure.
talking to the people who are out on the water every day, you
Sure.
can miss the whole picture
Right.
or a holistic picture of it
Right,
all.
right.
And so, we did the Neosho Bass series.
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I loved
last
it.
year,
Yeah.
and man, just like opened up a whole world for me
Sure.
in understanding what goes into the science and how they're different and why it matters, and just getting into all of that. It was really cool. And then also, we touched on it a little bit. It wasn't the focus of that, but the Washita strain or subspecies, which may be a species, and
Little River
the Little
strain.
River one.
Yep.
So we've got these right now. It seems like we have within the state potentially four different species entirely,
That's exciting.
and we're the only state that would have all four for Arkansas at least. What are your thoughts on like how we should manage these four unique different strains?
I guess some of the problem I had, and I went down and addressed the Game and Fish Commission and did a big plea, very passionate one, and they came away knowing very well where Duane stood and what his.
And this is recent. This is just in the last
fair-
few months.
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
And won them over, the commissioners and all, and then they kind of directed me to sit down with a biologist, which I did, and I hope we can. I have a little trouble when we paint this broad stroke across black bass management, like what's good for Bull Shoals Lake is good for your farm pond, is also good for a 2-acre lake, and is also good for a small creek. Okay, I have some, we need to sit down and talk about that, because what I have seen on smallmouth bass populations, they're very unique, and just because this stream is this way, 2 ridges over in this watershed, it can be somewhat different. I have seen so many streams just in my lifetime that went from were good to once was, okay? Usually from either habitat degradation, horrible, combined with a lot of overharvest. And you can easily take out a whole tier of the upper population of mature fish out of a small stream, and it will never recover. Okay, think about that. If our agreed upon statewide average, and this is what we did on our smallmouth bass task force, okay? We did a lot of studies. I fished 88 streams in the state of Arkansas and took detailed recordings of everything from sedimentation levels to food sources to condition of the fish and all these things. It was great. I loved serving with that with some very famed and wonderful career biologists, like Mark Oliver and Steve Philippek and guys like that who spent their life studying these. And then we brought in Otto Fajan, who was the legendary one who wrote Missouri's regulations way back in the early days and all. So that was a great team of people to work with. So what we found is they're very, very slow growing, but they'll also live long, long lives. There was a couple of fish, one out of the Caddo River that we collected otolith bone. It's like growth rings on a tree. That fish was 16 years old. Okay,
Wow.
one out of the lower Buffalo River was in that same age class. Neither fish weighed 4 pounds. I think one was 3.8 and the other was like 3.6. But they were mature fish from both a Ouachita and an Ozark sampling. But from all of this, we found that the statewide average, now Crooked Creek grows a little bit faster because it's a little more nutrient rich and a little more fertile, but statewide average, it was 6 years to grow a 12-inch fish. Okay, that's a pretty slow growth rate. My thing is you can, with those kind of growth rates, you can easily, okay, let's just think about this. I used to draw this diagram and put like 100 marks on a diagram of a pool of water. You send a guy in there over the weekend and he's catching to keep for his meals or fill the freezer or whatever, and let's just say he abides by the rules and regulations. The amount of damage that he did in that weekend by cropping off that top tier of some of the most mature fish, and then you get guys the next weekend and come do this.
What is that limit right now?
Well, on a lot of the blue ribbon streams, we set it as 2 fish, 14-inch limit, okay?
That's all right.
And that seems pretty conservative. But you think how many 214s, and we're talking 14s to 18 to 20s, which is about the top tier of the old age smallmouth that we have, okay? You seldom see a fish in any Ozark stream over 20 inches. 18 is pretty rare. So about 18 inches where most of the big smallmouth seem to max out in most of our waters. But you could easily crop off, so it's no longer very many 18s, and then it's 16s that are big fish in that particular creek. I've seen this. Then it's 14s, and it's 15s or 13s, and it keeps going down. So much is against smallmouth bass. We don't stock them. We don't really need to stock them if we take care of them. But just because they spawn or make beds doesn't mean they always have successful spawns. We get floods all the time during the time that they're on beds, and that whole year's worth of recruitment is gone. The biologists also tell us about 50% of a nest never makes it to adulthood, okay? And of that adult, only, 2% ever make it to the replacement level of the parent fish? That's pretty tough, and they consider that just normal how it happens in these streams. So I'm coming at it pretty passionately that these smallmouth need our help, okay? We don't need to fish for them for food. Come on. I mean, we've got great lakes all over this state. If we want to have a fish fry tomorrow for our family, I'm going to go chase big bluegills maybe out of one of the lakes that, I'm going to go chase white bass or channel cats or crappie or something like that or even maybe largemouth bass out of a lake where it needs some culling in that 14-inch size, okay? And I don't feel like I helped that fishery by doing that. That is not the case that I have seen, anyway, in smallmouth bass. I have never seen any of our streams where they're big-headed, skinny-bodied, and overpopulated, and all in one size group, like they couldn't make it to the next size because there's too many of them. Have you ever seen that? I mean, it's...
I don't think so.
No. So I think we need special regs just for smallmouth bass streams, okay?
Just smallmouth in general.
In moving waters, okay? In streams.
Okay, in streams.
I really, I've seen, Missouri is much more, in my opinion, ahead of us on, the Gasconade River is amazing. And they have a 118-inch limit on almost all of it and have had for years. And I've got friends that guide up there and I see their catches on a weekly basis, and it's like, we might catch 1 or 2 like what they're catching every day up there. And so the only way to get 20-inch smallmouth is they have to be released when they're 14, 15, 16 to go through that. And it doesn't happen overnight. And smallmouth don't just respond to regulation changes overnight. We put the catch and release on the Crooked Creek stretch at Fredberry, 2-mile stretch. Dave Whitlock used to call that the fishiest looking fishless water on the whole creek because it got hammered. And for years, I mean, Yellville that was our grocery store, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it took a toll on it. And we used to, when we guided, just like pick up your rods and let's just paddle out. It looks good, but they just weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly, very slowly, that's been catch release now for 20 years or so. It has taken that long, and it is now recovering. But it doesn't just happen overnight because of the super slow growth rates of these fish.
Mm-hmm.
So,
with that, have you noticed more of a catch and release culture on smallmouth in the last
and the Game
20
and
years?
Fish will tell me, well, our survey showed 83% of the people are practicing catch and release. So what are you all? And I'm like, yeah, but I know what's going on. We see it. Game and Fish does their surveys. They do it in a parking lot at those popular places, and they're surveying tourists primarily. And they're up here from Texas. They're like, oh, it was great. We caught 4 smallmouth today. I've never caught a smallmouth. It was a great experience, and we love it and all that. And, yes, we turned them loose or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And so that's that group that's being surveyed. What I'm seeing is Bubba on the four-wheeler and his little side-by-side carrying a ice chest on the back of it, and he's seining minnows out of the creek, and he's always done it this way, and he'll always do it this way. And he is over harvesting, and he's doing it on a regular basis. And the damage just a handful of people, okay, is doing is significant, is putting a huge, huge negative impact on a lot of these streams. Maybe not so much in Crooked Creek itself. See, I fish a lot of the little smaller streams, and they are much more fragile. I mean, the 4 of us could go in a week do some very significant damage if we went and fished with live minnows and crawdads on some of these little creeks, and the amount of mature fish that we would take out. Just think how long would it take to replace those fish? They don't fall out of the sky when it rains. They don't migrate in after a flood. Mm-hmm. I've got pet fish that have marks on them of a certain, and I know, and I catch them year after year out of the same rock. I don't care how high the flood gets. They don't wash to Mississippi and swim back up. They hunker down, They're tough. They get up under the bridge piling, or they get up under a hollow log or whatever, and they hold out, and then they live on that same rock year after year. My big thing is, and here's what I would say to the biologists, and I would love to sit down with them. I respect them, okay? They've got the science and everything. Let's put it into, why can't we make, if we've got Ouachita, Neosho strain, Northern strain, and Little River strain in our waters, and there's the only place, is that not special? Is that not part of a wilderness experience that you need to go experience that for something more than just fish sticks, okay? Do you realize that the limit in the Ouachitas is a 4-fish limit, 10 inches? Do you realize that's what it is? Yes. If it's not in a blue ribbon stream, which are very few, like the Caddo and the Ouachita, and I don't know what else is down there, but 10-inch fish is a fish stick. Okay, after you fillet it, what do you got?
Not much.
To me, that fish is so much more valuable put back into the river. I don't want to come across as anti-eating fish, okay? That is not it. I eat fish tonight. I love it, okay? It's healthy to do that, and we have the right to do that. But we also have the privilege and the honor of living in a very beautiful part of the country that has some very unique species of fish that need protection for us to be having healthy populations.
Yeah.
You can't keep going in there, and there's more and more of us doing it all the time. Never seems to amaze me at how people, with the way the internet is and these podcasts, there's good and bad, okay? I'll be honest with you, okay?
100%.
Because we are exposing. Hopefully we're educating people. If you're going to play in our backyard, do it responsibly and don't kill these fish, okay?
That's always been the tone that we try to take. And I even remember years ago when we interviewed you, like 3 years ago when we first started, you were one of our first interviews. It was, I remember you saying this, and it's always stuck in my mind of, if you move here, get in with the rhythm of the Ozarks.
Yes,
Don't try to make it something that's not ever supposed to be or ever was meant to be.
Yes.
Understand it, learn it, be a part of it.
And respect the Ozark and Washita culture of what this is,
Before we get away from
Yeah.
the game and fish real quick, I want to mention a couple things, and you touched on it, but I want to piggyback here. And I don't want to. We're not, anti game and fish. We want to
Right.
collaborate.
We can't do anything
right?
without them,
So
we
they're
just want to
human.
be right.
Every human does what? Makes decisions based on the information that is currently available to them, right?
Mhm.
And the Game and Fish does that. They're an organization that makes the best decisions that they understand how to do based on the information that they currently have, right? Well, one thing he alluded to, where they took their surveys, were at public accesses, okay? And it's not
Where the most people are.
it's not. That's not the people keeping the fish. So their numbers show, hey, everybody's throwing them back, right?
Oh, we witnessed some horrible.
It is private landowners who will never be asked in a survey. Are you?
You'll
keeping
never
fish?
catch them either. They're good.
So they're making decisions. They don't have that information, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the information that it is private landowners, and so this is where a beautiful collaboration can take place between, like you had with the task force, between anglers and people using the resource and the game and fish. So we all want the same thing.
Yeah,
we all
right.
want to have fun, enjoying the outdoors, and have quality experiences. So we can collaborate. in that way.
I just think
for
smallmouth bass in moving waters in the state of Arkansas need to be in a separate category, especially if they are unique. Okay, and they are.
They are.
We know that.
And
the
we're the
show,
only state that has all four of these
is
smallmouth
that not
strains.
worth? Is that alone not worth protecting?
Yeah.
And what does protection look like? And they're like, well, we have to manage them. And I'm like, what does management mean? Allowing a certain amount of what we call sustainable harvest? That's putting a dent in the population. So when I go to have a great quality hiking in, canoeing, kayaking experience in the Ozarks, it's sub-level from what it could be. I want the optimum. I want the biggest ones that this stream can grow, and I want the most, and that's not impossible to ask for if it's a healthy stream. We have enough problems with otters and just people that are deep hooking fish, and there's a certain mortality rate in numbers of people fishing.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I mean that happens. People
Even if
fish,
they're putting them back, they're going to
people
be some
fishing
fish
live
back.
minnows
Yeah.
and crawdads and soft plastics. Those are notorious for deep hooking, and I see it all the time. I'm picking up fish that are gasping, and I look at it, and there's a hook. And maybe sometimes the line's cut and the guy tried his best. And that's going to happen.
Yeah,
So
sure.
there is a mortality rate already out there. And the more people we put out there, that number is obviously going to increase.
Yeah.
I just think it's not bad to say this fish is so special that it needs to be eliminated out of the harvest categories.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing this in Alabama. Okay. They have about 5 different species of bass in their streams, and they're starting to recognize that they're unique to their waters. In other places, Texas with their Guadalupe bass, it's a pretty cool fish. They're very, let's celebrate this. We're not trying to keep people from experience. We want people to experience it. But if everybody goes in there and even abides by the limit, I don't think the way the slow growth rates of smallmouth are and the recruitment with natural disasters of flooding and droughting and introduction of otters and all these things that are against them, allowing harvest on top of that too, in my opinion, just keeps it from ever being. Again, there are streams that I used to fish a lot of as a kid that there are no smallmouth in them, and they were good streams. And like, what happened? Well, I think the number one thing was purely over harvest. There's been a lot of horrible habitat destruction in a lot of them. A lot of gravel mining still going on private lands that has some of these streams. I don't even recognize them anymore. If I haven't been back to them in years, and I go in there and it just brings me to tears to see how bad the string bank is gone and the tree cover canopy's gone. And where I used to catch big smallmouth, there might be a few dinks cruising around, and then I go travel around and talk to other people. How's this? I used to fish this creek as a kid, and like, they're not in here anymore. And I'm like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, I totally get it, and I understand your passion. I know you've been fishing smallmouth your whole life, your whole career, and they mean a lot to us too. And
Sure.
people who grew up here understand that the smallmouth is the native fish. The trout, they're not from here. They're foreigners, but we like them too. But the smallmouth is something that's worth being protected. And
Sure.
I do think that conversations, should be had and taking into account the holistic picture of the biologists, the anglers, the guides, and trying to get the best outcome. It's not easy. I like the game and fish. They've got a tough job.
Sure.
And guides do and anglers do too. So it's doing
It comes down to the
best we can
responsibility
with
of
what
the
we have.
angler. If we're all out there and we all want the same thing, we got to share this water, we got to share this resource,
Mhm.
but we also be good stewards of it and protect it and wise about what we harvest. And
Yeah.
and I just think smallmouth. If you go and just make yourself a comparison list, what did this dead smallmouth do for me compared to this smallmouth I released?
Mhm.
This one gave you a 6-inch fish stick. That's it, right? I mean, you basically, made him a meal.
Mhm.
That's it. That released smallmouth is now one of the numbers that can be caught. He's also growing. He's also breeding. He's part of the population. He's a symbol of the wild Ozark and Washita River experience that somebody else can enjoy again and again and again.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's no.
It's a no-brainer.
I can choose my meals somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, fellas, I appreciate you so much. It's getting dark.
Hey.
And before we go, I do want to talk about night fishing, but we will talk about that on the next episode. So thank y'all for joining us, and we will see you next week.